Hello viewers, welcome to the program on well-being from Indian psychological perspective. We have with us today Professor S.K. Kiran Kumar, who is former professor of psychology in University of Mysore. So when we talk about well-being, is there a difference from Indian and Western psychological perspective?
Yeah, there is difference. First of all, we have to look into some of the concepts that we have. We have many concepts. Say, take for example, we have bhoga, which means enjoyment of sensory pleasure. Harsha, which is an excitement associated with some event. Or santosha, being pleased by some interpersonal interaction. We have ullasa, feeling pleasant. Trupti, satisfaction of all kinds of pleasures. Then we have arogya, feeling healthy. Then we have swasthya, which means a balanced state of mind and body. Then we have other terms like tushti, kalyana, mangala, shubha, shanti, ananda and sthita prajna, which is famous in Bhagavad Gita. So, when you look at these different terminologies, one thing we need to understand is, because I have told in the lecture on consciousness that Indian tradition understands consciousness different from mind, and we have turiya as distinguished from waking, dream and sleep. And I also said that ananda is a characteristic of turiya. So, therefore, it is possible for us to categorize these different terminologies with reference to different states of consciousness. So, some of the terms are associated with our waking consciousness experiences. So, whereas some other terms are related to our experience related to spirituality, and still there are terms like kalyana, mangala and all which are related to a broad vision. We speak of loka kalyana, okay? We speak of mangala. So, some of these terms have a broader vision which is not restricted to one particular human being. So, then you see that another way of understanding these concepts is with reference to the concept of panchakosha. Many Indians are familiar with this, and the reference to panchakosha comes in Upanishads, particularly in Taittiriya Upanishad. So, there they speak of 5 koshas, which we can understand as 5 dimensions of human being: annamaya kosha, pranamaya kosha, manomaya kosha, vijnanamaya kosha and anandamaya kosha. So, these can be understood as our physical or bodily self, our vital self, our mental self, intuition and higher intellectual self, and beyond this is what is called transcendental self. So, our sensory enjoyment, which we speak of, desire, pleasure and all, that is mostly related to annamaya, pranamaya and manomaya kosha. But the sense of peace, shanti, for example, serenity, silence, all these will come from vijnanamaya onwards. And anandamaya is not a kosha in itself, it is a state which is full of peace according to spiritual traditions. So, these are the ways of understanding. And then you see we have other 2 important terms, preyas and shreyas. Now, what it means is, preyas is referred to all the sensory, worldly, material enjoyment, pleasure and everything, whereas shreyas is something more which extends not only to the individual, but to the society, community and everybody. So, when our elders, when they give benediction, Ashiravad, they will say Shreyo Bhava, Shreyo. So, it is something not just you enjoy material comfort, you have something more than that. So, we can make those distinctions as to which terminologies can be understood as prayers and which can be understood as shreyas. For example, Sukha, Santosha, Harsha, etc. are all prayers, whereas Ananda, Tushti, Kalyana, Mangala, these terms can be more related to what you call shreyas. And the word Sukha is used in a generic sense, it is not just a material pleasure. We say loka samasta sukhino bhavantu, let the whole world be happy. When you say that, so it is a very generic term which speaks of the well-being to everybody. And now, taking all this into consideration, I have made a distinction about 3 perspectives on happiness and well-being we can find in our tradition. The first one I have called hedonistic perspective, which is the same as contemporary modern psychology also speaks of hedonia. Okay. And then it is related to our personal happiness and well-being through material and worldly pleasures that we speak of, which speaks of need fulfillment, need satisfaction, what Maslow speaks of deficiency needs, for example. And we have the collective perspective. It is related to sense of well-being involving others like family, community, society, nation. We not only think of ourselves. Modern psychology, positive psychology speaks, we have to take into consideration the collective also. So, the collective is already taken care in this perspective. We speak of a broader vision. And then we have the, transcendental perspective. It is related to spiritual experience beyond all these personal and social. That is where the terms like Ananda, when we compare Indian tradition with positive psychology which is coming up.
The concept of well-being has been the major focus there.
Yes, exactly.
And it has emerged in a very big way in the last around 2 decades.
Correct.
So, it talks about optimal functioning, flourishing, well-being, happiness. So, how do you differentiate positive psychology and Indian psychology?
Yeah, first we have to see what positive psychology is, how why it came up or what their focus is. So, you see that it is an emerging field within modern psychology now, and it is not a new movement, because many people already have explored these ideas, and humanistic psychologists particularly emphasized many of the concepts which are already now proposed in positive psychology, and even Abraham Maslow also used the term positive psychology. So, that way the positive psychology is not something totally new. And it is not a new paradigm also, because it is the same scientific paradigm which is used even in examining the subjects. So, the focus is different, and some of the pioneers particularly are Martin Seligman and Mike Csikszentmihalyi. They were the first people to announce positive psychology, and the first issue of positive psychology came in American Psychologist in 2002, January issue. It was fully devoted to that, and there are many articles related to different themes. And the other people who contributed in the initial movement is Christopher Peterson, Chris Snyder, Shane Lopez, Ed Diner, Carol Reef, and Rayan and Daisy. These are some of the prominent people who wrote a lot between 2000 and 2004-5, and later many others have joined this movement. And why positive psychology? If you ask, the question is, psychology has become largely about healing. It concentrates on repairing damage within a disease model of human functioning. It neglects the fulfilled individual and the thriving community. So, these are some of the issues which they have considered. You see, and the Seligman and Csikszentmihalyi say psychologists have scant knowledge of what makes life worth living, and psychologists know very little about how normal people flourish under more benign condition. That means, we have concentrated more on illness, disease, repairing the damage. You see, for example, the articles published in American, in psychological abstracts. Starting from 1887, Myers has collected the data. You just look at the graphs there, you see the anxiety and depression is the highest one, and you think of joy, happiness, life satisfaction, you say that hardly there are very few studies when you consider that. So, what it means is psychologists have focused more on negative emotions, negative states of mind. They have not bothered to see what is positive in human beings, positive living, positive states of mind. So, you see that there is an agenda of positive psychology. What is the agenda? We have to catalyze a change in the focus of psychology from preoccupation only with repairing the worst things in life to also build positive qualities. We have to articulate a vision of good life that is empirically sound. That means it should be based on scientific research and it should be understandable and attractive. Then we have, we have to show that actions can lead to well-being, to positive individuals and to thriving communities. And we have to find out what kinds of families result in children who flourish. You know that divorce has become a norm in Western societies. So, they are thinking differently now. What work settings support the greatest satisfaction among employees, workers, employee satisfaction. Then what policies result in strongest civic engagement, what kind of institution should be there. Then how people lives can be most worth living. So, these are some of the agenda of positive psychology. Similarly, we have to speak of positive individual traits.
Okay.
See, courage, wisdom, forgiveness, love, lots of positive traits that we can speak of. Then we also have to speak of collective civic virtues. See, these are personal, whereas collective virtues are altruism, work ethics. What promotes a better society, in other words, and what institutions,
So
who is a good citizen.
So, at the larger level.
At the larger level. Okay. So, these are the main themes or focus of the study. So, you see that we have subjective experiences and we have true broad trends of research. All the research generally are classified now. One is called hedonia, another is called eudaimonia. Hedonia is more focused on pleasure seeking and avoidance of pain. So, you have heard, about hedonistic principle, hedonism. So, anything related to pleasure seeking is hedonia. Eudaimonia is oriented to actualization, growth, seeking meaning, fulfillment of life goals, etc. So, this is a broad distinction under which most of the research are reviewed, discussed, and we found the first review coming in Annual Review of Psychology in 2002 by Rayhan and Daisy. And parallel to this is two main types of research which has gone on. One under the heading subjective well-being. This was a concept given by Ed Diner, who developed also a scale called satisfaction with life scale, and who also tried to see whether a person has more of positive effect over negative effect, the balance between that. Then another concept came, psychological well-being. Carol Riff gave that idea, and there are many inventories, tools which measure psychological well-being, and it is based on the humanistic psychologist concept of self-actualization. So, these are the two essential focus of research contemporarily in positive psychology. So, you see different researchers have focused on different concepts. Say for example, whether material wealth and affluence gives that, whether our fulfillment of desires help happiness, whether development of our potentialities and individuality, human relationships and relatedness, one's psychological state and personality dispositions like optimism, etc., or development of our strengths. Nowadays people speak of signature strength, character strength. So, whether and virtues, you see, whether they give happiness, then whether faith in a religion and spirituality gives our well-being. So, like that researchers are trying to focus on all these different aspects.
Because usually when we talk about well-being and happiness, usually we think that if a person is, we talk about this in terms of economic aspect. If a person is rich, have money, then the person is happy. So, what are your views on it, and how does the research findings, what are the research findings on
you
this?
see that researchers have found that, for example, there are Seligman and Diner have actually summarized many studies in their papers, and you see that earning more money, staying healthy, education, race and climate, they have no direct effect on happiness. Secondly, living in a wealthy democracy, getting married, avoiding negative events and emotions, acquiring a rich social network and affiliating to a religion, they have a more moderate and strong effect on happiness. So, that means you see that money is not a important factor. And there are many cross national and cross cultural studies which have compared poor and rich nations. There is something called purchase power parity, PPP, and there is what is called satisfaction index. So, they have correlated and they have found, for example, USA has the highest PPP on a scale of 1 to 10, whereas India's PPP is somewhere 5 or something like that.
It's very low.
Very low, But even then, on the life satisfaction index, the difference between India and USA is not very significant. So, what it shows is rich nation and poor nations do not significantly differ statistically on the index. And they have also found that up to some point, till you fulfill your basic needs, we require money, some comfort we require. And afterwards, if you keep on enhancing your monetary acquisition, rise in pay, etc., that will not automatically positively keep on increasing the sense of happiness and satisfaction or well-being. So, this is a very major finding that we come across in positive psychology research literature. And you also see that there are other variables which are taken into account, like age, gender, income, assuming there is enough to afford life's necessities, give little clue to someone's happiness, whether young people are happy, elder people are happy, older people are happy, whether male or female differences, they do not necessarily tell us exactly who is happy or who is not happy. But on the other hand, better clues come from knowing people's traits and the quality of their work and leisure experiences. What type of a person one is, how they spend their leisure time, or how much they are satisfied with their work. These are the things which indicate one's level of happiness and well-being better than other factors.
So, in that sense, can we say that is happiness extrinsic or intrinsic?
Yeah, that is something which is coming, when whether they enjoy a supportive network of close relationship, whether the person has a faith that encompasses social support, purpose and hope. So, these are all how you relate, and there are certain necessary conditions, but they are not sufficient conditions. Say for example, good social relationship, extroversion, low neuroticism, relatively low level of psychopathology, these are all considered necessary to feel sense of well-being and happy, but they are not sufficient conditions. So, the question that you raised about intrinsic or extrinsic. So, there are some researchers who say if people strive more for extrinsic goals such as money, more numerous their problems are, and they will be, and their well-being will be less robust, less strong. So, this is a view given by Kasser and Rion, and there are others who have similar opinion. Objective life circumstances have negligible role to play in a theory of happiness, and then happiness depends, as nature shows, less on exterior things than most people suppose. So, many of these observations indicate that happiness is more intrinsic than extrinsic. So, that is where we stand today.
So, in this context, how do you relate like positive psychology with Indian psychology when we are talking about Indian psychology?
Yeah, when we talk about Indian psychology, you know as an Indian that our tradition for thousands of years, all our ancient rishis, sadhus, yogis, everybody, they have looked within rather than looked outside for a final source of happiness. So, that is
intrinsic.
It is more intrinsic. So, that is the fundamental difference that we have to see. So, you see one of the thinkers of India, he made a beautiful statement. An upwardly mobile society that enables its citizens to achieve a high level of material comfort may not provide mental and spiritual succor. So, you may do anything, you may keep on doing that, but it will not help much because you will not get happiness. In that article he says Mercedes Benz is not equal to happiness. So, that is how it is. So, there are fundamental, not only that ours is intrinsic oriented, there are other factors also. One of the researchers, Indian researchers, has made a comparison. What is well-being in West and how well-being is seen in India. You see, in the West, they emphasize more on the ability to satisfy one's needs, avoidance of stress and frustration, exercising control on the environment in pursuit of satisfaction of personal and social needs. But in India, needs need not be totally fulfilled or denied. See, they may be denied also. Sometimes we may not be able to fulfill all our needs, but we are asked to regulate them, right. Moderation and balance between satisfaction and denial of needs. You should not completely deny the needs, or you should not always after needs satisfaction. You have to bring a balance. Extremes are to be avoided. Then joy, success, failures and frustrations are all to be treated as part of life. Today is what in South India we call Ugadi festival. Probably in other places they say Gudi Padwa, Vaishakhi and various names we have. One of the things that we do is we take both jaggery and neem. Jaggery is sweet, neem is bitter. Why do we take this? We take it to indicate that in life there is sweet and bitterness, and we should take both as part of living. It is not only that we eat jaggery and we do not want neem.
Taking a balanced perspective.
Yeah, it is a beautiful coincidence that today is Ugadi and we are talking about it. So, well-being lies not being overwhelmed by positive or negative emotions. So, in Krishna tells Arjuna, who is Sthita Prajna? Dukkeshu anudvignamanaha, sukeshu vigataspruhaha. In dukkha, in sorrow, you do not get agitated. In sukha, in happiness, do not get excited. So, and the one who controls, desires, raga, bhaya, fear, krodha, anger, sthitadihi muni uchyate. He is a stable minded person. So, this is the Indian perspective, you see, what we see. And coming to what our Indian tradition says, an individual's happiness and well-being is an integral aspect of the well-being of the collective and of the universe. So, do not think only about yourself, take into account the collective, people around you, also the universe. So, as I told already, lokas samasta sukhino bhavantu. When you say loka, it is not only human beings, you take the whole planet. See, today we are in a planetary crisis. You see, we have to save Earth. So, all these, the environmental pollution, everything is spoken. And why is it happening? Because we are trying to use nature beyond what we are supposed to do. So, now everybody is speaking of how to conserve water, how not to pollute environment, how to save earth from catastrophe. So, the Indians have always thought of this broader perspective on that. Then for that, how do you do? You see, lead a life of moderation without excesses, within a dharmic framework, subordinating the pursuit of wealth and desires, keeping self-realization in sight. See, I already told on the talk on consciousness, we have a higher state of consciousness, transcendence. To experience transcendence is to come out of the limitations of the ordinary consciousness. That is called liberation, moksha. So, it means that we can broaden the scope of our ordinary waking state. When we do that, we are moving towards liberation. So, how do we live? For that, if we immerse ourselves in satisfying desires and acquiring wealth, we lose sight of that. So, I always give an analogy for it. You must have heard of what is called push-pull train.
Yeah.
There, in between the bogies, carriages are there. There is a front engine and a back engine. Front engine pulls you forward, back engine pushes you from behind. So, dharma is pushing you. It is like a conductor giving you direction. Moksha is liberation, is the goal.
Yeah.
Human beings have to lead a life like that push-pull train, satisfying their desires and wealth with a direction in the front and a direction, a goal in the front and a direction from the back. So, this is why you see dharma becomes the key concept, because we exactly do not know. People speak of what liberation is, but we are, unless we experience, we do not know, but we know about it. So,
when we talk about like happiness, well-being, and you also have talked about Ananda in the beginning. So, how do you relate Ananda with consciousness that we talk about in Indian psychology perspective?
See, the basic thing is, in modern positive psychology, Martin Seligman, he speaks of pleasure life, meaningful life and engaged life.
Okay.
All put together, he says that is full life. Okay. So, when you think of India, we also have something beyond. You see, Ananda is beyond the full life of Seligman, because this self-realization and liberation are the concepts which go beyond the ordinary sense of happiness and well-being. Okay. That is why in our country, whether you use Ananda or some other term, ultimately there is a significance for that. So, you see that Ananda is considered as sustainable happiness. That is why we have names like Vivekananda, Abhedananda, Yogananda, Muktananda, Chinmayananda.
The suffixing of their names.
Suffixing. Why they are all Anandamayi, Mata, Amrutanandamayi? Why all that? Because they have all reached that state. And they are living in a sustained happiness state. So, that is why Ananda is a word used as a suffix. That is beyond that.
Okay. So, viewers, today we learned about well-being from Indian psychological perspective. Now, the way well-being is conceptualized in the West, it is limited. Whereas, in Indian psychological perspective, we see that it has taken a very deeper and comprehensive outlook, talking in terms of sustainability. So, sustainable happiness is the key term that is there in Indian psychology.
Exactly, exactly.
So, thank you so much, Professor Kiran Kumar, for this enlightening talk.